The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly.
Good morning, everyone. This is Debbie Royce, Empire State Development's Corporate Secretary. I'd like to welcome everyone to this morning's Bond Financing Committee meeting. Before we formally begin, I would ask that everyone please mute your audio unless you're speaking, and we'll do a quick roll call of the committee members before we get started. Kevin Eunice.
Here.
Howard Zemsky.
Here.
And Benson Martin, Designee for Acting Superintendent of the Department of Financial Services, Adrian Harris.
Here.
Thanks so much, everybody, for joining today. And Acting Chair Eunice, you are ready to begin.
Thanks, Debbie. Good morning. Before I call this meeting to order, I will note for the record that I will serve as the acting chair for today's committee meeting. I now call to order the meeting of the Bond Finance Committee, members of the New York State Urban Development Corporation, DBA, Empire State Development, for Monday, October 4th, 2021. Before we get started, I will ask everyone to please mute your phones until you're ready to speak, and then I would also ask that anyone wishing to speak state their name before they begin. I'd also like to note for the record that in accordance with the recently passed legislation, this meeting will be conducted by teleconference. Also note for the record that the public was given the opportunity to comment on the agenda items by submitting their written comments by 4:30 p.m. on Friday, and that note further for the record that no comments were received from the public concerning today's item. I would like to also note for the record that I did trim my beard for this meeting, but I'm not wearing a tie. The committee members have received the relevant written materials in advance of today's meeting and are free to ask questions at any time. I will now ask the committee members whether anyone has a potential conflict of interest with respect to today's agenda item. If so, I would ask you to please make an appropriate disclosure at this time, and we will remind you to recuse yourself from any discussion or vote with regard to such item. Hearing no conflicts, I would now ask Matthew Bray, ESD Treasurer, to present today's agenda item, which relates to the issuance of state personal income tax revenue bonds and or state sales tax revenue bonds. Matt, when you're ready, please.
Thank you. Good morning. Today, the committee is being asked to approve the proposed sale and delivery of one or more series or subseries of the New York State Urban Development Corporation, to be referred to as the corporation, state sales tax revenue bonds, or the bonds. In connection with approving the bonds, the committee is also asked to approve the forms of multiple documents, as well as the parameters of the bond sale terms. Bonds may be issued as tax-exempt and/or as federally taxable bonds on one or more dates in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $3 billion. As stated in the resolutions, the committee, on behalf of the corporation, also is being asked to delegate authority to certain corporation officers and employees to establish within certain parameters the final terms of the bond sale, including the aggregate principal amount, and to take all actions deemed necessary to accomplish the final sale and delivery of the bonds. The bonds will be issued by the corporation pursuant to the New York State or the state sales tax revenue bond financing program and will be secured by a pledge of financing agreement payments that are payable from amounts legally required to be deposited into the sales tax revenue bond tax fund by the state. Sales tax revenue bond tax fund receives a statutory allocation of 2% rate of taxation, equivalent to 2 cents on every dollar taxed. Distributions of such funds are subject to annual appropriations by the state legislature. The Bond Financing Committee previously approved master continuing disclosure agreements that will apply to the bonds, the appointment of co-bond counsel, and the submission of an application to the Public Authorities Control Board, or PACB. The authorization to fund the projects or programs for which the bonds will be issued. On September 15, 2021, the PACB approved such application and authorized the issuance of up to $3 billion principal amount of state sales tax revenue bonds and/or state personal income tax revenue bonds. Proceeds from the sale of the bonds will be used to finance projects relating to state facilities, economic development activities, and certain other state-supported activities, and may refund certain outstanding state-supported debt previously issued. Bonds will be sold on a competitive and/or negotiated basis as fixed-rate tax-exempt and fixed-rate taxable bonds. The tax-exempt and taxable bonds will be offered through a single preliminary official statement and sold pursuant to separate notices of sale. In accordance with the attached resolution and exhibits, the committee is requested to adopt the New York State Urban Development Corporation Supplemental Resolutions 2021-1 authorizing sales tax bonds and 2021-1 authorizing PIT bonds as amended and restated. Approve the form of the supplemental schedules. Authorize the sale of each series of the bonds on a competitive and/or negotiated basis. Approve the form and content of the preliminary official statement, the official statements, and various documents connected with the sale and delivery of the bonds. And authorize certain corporation officers and employees to take all actions deemed necessary to accomplish the final sale and delivery of the bonds, and refund certain outstanding state-supported debt previously issued by the corporation and other authorized issuers of state-supported debt, including the payment of any amounts necessary to terminate or reinstate any interest rate exchange agreement related to the bonds being refunded. By approving the Financing Committee resolution, the committee will establish $3 billion as the maximum aggregate par amount of bonds that may be issued, establish a maximum true interest cost for the bonds, and delegate to certain corporation officers and employees the power to determine the terms of the bonds within the parameters set forth therein, including but not limited to the final aggregate principal amount of the bonds, the principal amount of each series of the bonds, principal amount of the bonds maturing in each year, final maturity dates for such bonds, and the interest rates of the bonds. Issue and deliver the bonds pursuant to a bond purchase agreement if the bonds are sold on a negotiated basis. Award the bonds to one or more successful bidders if the bonds are sold on a competitive basis. And make such changes to the related documents deemed necessary and appropriate. The bonds are expected to price in the middle of October and close shortly thereafter. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Just want to remind folks that to state your name before speaking. Are there any questions or comments from the committee members on this item? Matt, it's Kevin Eunice. Just quick question. As I went through the resolution, and I think I know the answer, but I figured it was worth asking. It has a not to exceed interest amount for the sale of the bonds at 7.5 for taxable and 10. I'm sorry, for tax exempt 7.5 and 10 for taxable. Just remind me what that is, and then do we expect to come anywhere near that for the sale of these bonds?
And those are the rates that were, I guess, provided to us by the Department of Budget, but the current rates will be based on current market, which is much lower than that, which should be around 2% or so. So, no, we will not become close to those rates.
Got it. All right. Any other questions or comments from the directors? Nope. As noted earlier, we do not have any comments from the public with regard to this item, and I would now entertain a motion for approval.
So moved. So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. There being no further business, I would call for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good one. See you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Matt.
Okay, thank you. Bye.